So Oprah has admitted to her role in making unrealistic diets popular, but this story is complicated because she's also talking about how weight loss drugs have changed her life. Today on the podcast, Oprah taught us how to talk about weight in unhealthy ways. Can she make up for it? I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud, and this is Commotion. Listen, Oprah Winfrey has been the very public embodiment of society's obsession with weight for decades, and now she says she's done.
We've been shamed, and we've been told that unless we meet a certain standard of size, that we didn't deserve to be accepted or even to be loved. And what I know for sure is that I am done with it. I'm done with it. I'm done with it. I'm done with it. I'm done with the shaming.
That's Oprah opening the Weight Watchers special she just hosted a week ago called Making the Shift, a New Way to Think About Weight. It is just the latest in a series on the same kind of theme that she's done lately. She's essentially asking us to embrace ourselves as we are. Now listen, that's an Oprah thing to say. That's an Oprah thing to do, this idea that she is done with it. And if, like her, she's trying to say you want to go on one of these new weight loss drugs, you do you. No blame, no shame, right? But the thing is, Oprah's saying all of this as a very sort of newly publicly thin person. We haven't known Oprah like this, which means I think the message lands a little bit differently. And also, she holds a different level of responsibility for the conversation that we've had about diet culture. I want to get into all of this today with Scaachi, Koul, and Gianluca Russo. Scaachi Koul is a freelance writer. Gianluca is the author of a book called The Power of Plus. Scaachi, Gianluca, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Listen, I want to begin with maybe a personal question to each of you. Gianluca, Oprah's been this face of diet culture for a long time, like since well before you were born. How much of a presence has she been in your life and your relationship with your own weight?
Yeah, I think for me, she's always existed as this person who was at the center of the conversation around weight loss. And so I'm someone who experimented with kind of every weight loss possibility growing up, every different diet, and kind of method I could use. And I feel like always she was someone where I would see she was trying something new that maybe I could try as well. And so she really existed as this almost example to follow, which I think is true in a lot of the different things she does in life, right? Like she has this overwhelming influence in so many different aspects. But specifically when it comes to weight, that's kind of the role she always played. And so even if I wasn't directly looking to her, she always had some kind of impact on my mindset or what I was thinking, or maybe where I was looking for my next possible way to lose weight.
Scaachi, what about you? What does she mean to you?
I watched every episode of Oprah from like 1994 until the end of the show. I'm very, very familiar with her routine about weight and diet. My mom went on every single diet that she talked about. I did a bunch of the diets that she talked about. I mean, I did Weight Watchers. I have walked with her in this path. I'm frustrated a little bit by the way that she talks about all of this. I think some of it is it's strange. And the funny thing about Oprah too is like she's cosplaying as a normal person with us when she talks about these things. She's pretending as if she's having the same journey that we're all having, and her saying like, it's not your fault, it's out of your hands. It's a beautiful thought. Oprah's a billionaire. So she is fundamentally having a different conversation with herself and her body and her doctors than the rest of us are having. But she's done something really impressive, which is making her seem approachable.
Okay, I want to come back to that idea in just a moment. But first, I want to take a moment to listen to this exchange. It's from 1985. This is Joan Rivers interviewing Oprah on The Tonight Show.
50 pounds. You shouldn't let that happen to you. Very pretty. You know what? No, I don't want to hear. Let me tell you this. Let me tell you something. Pretty girl and you're single. You must lose the weight.
I'm going to. You know what? We are now AM Chicago. We're starting a diet with Oprah.
Grace,
yes.
Gianluca, how do you feel hearing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it feels like a good kind of portrayal or depiction of what so many people go through in terms of the way they're kind of ridiculed for their body, which I think is why so many people related to Oprah during this time period, is that she never kind of, quote unquote, got away with it. She was always kind of attacked for it in these ways. Yeah. It was something people could relate to. And so it's kind of painful to see that or to hear that. And of course, like, I hope that we have made progress and we're not kind of that deliberate when we're attacking people for their weight nowadays, but also I'm aware of the fact that we still are in many ways. And so I think it's really frustrating to hear, but I think it really represents the way Oprah was treated for a long time, which for me, gives me a little sympathy for the way that she handled the situation during that time period.
Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, in the special that aired last week, Oprah talked about how much that moment hurt her and how she went on to gain a lot of weight after that, and then she's been yo-yo dieting for like 40 years afterwards. And now it seems like Oprah's maybe trying to land the plane here. She's trying to say, I'm done with that story that I started 40 years ago or so. In the past, we've seen, just the last little while, the past year or so, we've seen Oprah resign from the board of Weight Watchers. She's disclosed that she is taking one of those new weight loss drugs. She didn't say which one. She didn't say whether it's Mounjaro or Ozempic. And then part of putting the story behind her is her acknowledging this part that she played, which is because she played a huge part in creating a toxic diet culture, and then apologizing for her role. I just want to play you guys this part.
I have been a steadfast participant in this diet culture through the magazine, through the talk show for 25 years, through online. I've been a major contributor to it. I cannot tell you how many weight loss shows and makeovers I have done. And they have been a staple since I've been working in television. I've shared how that famous wagon of fat moment on the Oprah show is one of my biggest regrets. And Maya Angelou always said, when you know better, you do better. That's one of my favorite teachings from her. When you know better, you do better. So these conversations, for me, are an effort to do better. I own what I've done, and I now want to do better.
Scaachi, that's a fine sentiment to say. Do you buy it? Do you hear that and go like, Oprah, I believe you?
I mean, I don't know if it's about buying it. I mean, I think she's trapped. I think she's trapped like we kind of all are trapped. So part of this is that she helped build the culture, but she's also a person who's responding to it like everyone else. So Joan Rivers, for a good example, barely ate. Joan was very thin. And to the end of her life, she wouldn't eat past 3 p.m. And if she went to dinner with you, she'd put a mint on her plate. And that would be her dinner. Oh, she's also responding to people who have incredibly disordered relationships with food and with diet. She's stuck in a triple bind like we all are. Do I buy it? I don't know. That she's pretty thin right now. So she's also saying this in a body that's currently acceptable, maybe to her, certainly to other people. I don't know. Do I buy it? I think she feels bad. I think she recognizes that this isn't popular like it was in the 80s. You can't pull out the wagon of fat. People are not going to applaud you in the same way that they used to.
Yeah.
I think she wants things to be better, and I don't think she knows how to do it. Like we all don't know how to do it because we're stuck in these structures that are not built for bodies larger than a 6.
First of all, describing the wagon of fat moment to like a teen now, like, what do you mean Oprah brought out a wagon of fat in her during primetime television show? Like, what do you mean?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and people clapped. People were so excited for her, and when she lost that weight, people thought, oh, she figured it out. I'm going to figure it out now because Oprah was us. She was a conduit for the audience always. So she's doing that again in this special.
So I want to take that moment, that point that you just made, Scaachi, and maybe put it Gianluca, the idea that she's saying this in a body that is much more acceptable now. She gets to do the special from a position of, okay, she's a very thin person. She said she's been on these drugs. She's someone who's like on quote unquote on the other side of the quote unquote battle. Does that make the message land differently for you? That the idea that she's like, I'm done with the shaming. It was like, well, you can be.
Yeah, I think it's like twofold. It doesn't make it land differently for me per se, because I feel like who it does make it land differently for is the people who, like Scaachi said, are kind of trapped in that cycle and are still looking for the quote unquote inspiration to reach this new body.
Yes.
And so I think for them it lands differently because they say, yeah, I want to reduce the shame, but I also want to now look like you, so I'm going to pay more attention, because she lives in this more like socially acceptable body, this more like comfortable, thinner body. And so I think for them, it does make it a more appealing message because she has been, quote unquote, victorious over this battle for weight loss. But I think on the flip side, what you'll see in the conversation that has erupted online is around people who are not buying it, people who have actually been doing this work around body positivity and already trying to reduce the shame themselves over the past however many decades. I think for them, they don't buy it as much because to only get on this message once you lose the weight feels very counterintuitive to what that message really is.
I mean, the reason I'm interested in this story is because, like, Oprah, maybe more than any other famous person in America, was really well positioned to deliver the shift in communication about obesity, Scaachi. The idea that, like, we can move away from thinking of obesity as some kind of moral failing and towards the disease model. But she didn't do that. for a long time, she's not like the shift started yesterday, and she was not really participating in all of this. But now she seems like she's getting on board after all the magazines and after all the specials and after all the ways that she's talked about weight, even for the last 15 years or so. I mean, Weight Watchers is a wild organization to get behind. They used to have people weigh themselves publicly in front of strangers. That's to me, like, out of all organizations that you're going to work with, like, you go with the one that has that history. That feels a little bit wild to me. So I want to quote to you, Scaachi, from this great piece that was written by Tressie McMillan Cotton. She wrote it for the New York Times, and the quote is, "Oprah's trademark is turning big political questions into a personal narrative of freedom and triumph. In this case, the political question is body positivity and whether it can even exist in an era of Ozempic, which is like fraught with questions of affordability." You mentioned she's literally a billionaire. What do you think of this moment?
I mean, I think it's funny that we keep going to Oprah for our cues on what to think about weight.
Yeah.
I don't really know why we are. Like, I like Oprah too, but Oprah's 70 years old. So's my mom. And I love my mom, but I'm not talking to her about things that have to do with the culture because she was born a very long time ago. And I disagree with her assessment on how the world works. So, I mean, can you do it? I don't know. It depends on the person, but our choices are inherently political and her choices are inherently political. I mean, like, she is making decisions here and she's obsessed with categorizing weight loss somewhere. It's either to her a moral failing, personal willpower issue, or now it's a disease.
Right.
Why? Why does it have to be any of it? Can't it just be that some bodies look a certain way? Some people have their own health things and this is her own journey and whatever it is. Yeah. But she's so invested in putting these things in brackets that feel comfortable to her that she can approach. And then other people get to say the same things she's saying. She's giving us language and framework that then we will use. But I don't really go to her to try to figure out, like, can I live like this? Because she's not speaking to me. She's not speaking to the world that I live in.
Yeah, I think that, first of all, really healthy reminder of just the idea of like, hey, the person who shaped so many people's ideas of weight comes from a very specific generation, a very specific point of view. And the idea that, like, even as our collective views have maybe changed on weight, maybe we could look to different people for a reference point. Gianluca, as I said in the beginning, like, yeah, Oprah for sort of decades has been this personification of our very complicated relationship and expectations and moral judgment about body image and diet culture and all of that. But now she's kind of an interesting window into the future in a way, the future of body shaming, acceptance, and all of this stuff. Looking at where she is now, where do you think we're going in terms of the conversation?
Yeah, I don't think we're going somewhere super positive per se. Like, while I appreciate her message for sure here, and I do appreciate the shift in her message, I think she's acknowledging a lot of things that like I wish had been acknowledged earlier. That is paired up against this huge societal shift towards weight loss and towards this thin ideal of like the early 2000s that is going to, or at least from my perspective, still overtake Oprah's shift in this message. And so while I think we look at Oprah still and she has influence, I don't think this particular moment is going to have the level of influence to change a global narrative that's already happening around weight loss because of things like Ozempic and these other drugs. And so I think ultimately, like, this is great. Like, I do appreciate parts of this message for sure, but I don't think the way she's presented them or the timing is strong enough to counteract the fact that people now are chasing this thin ideal of the 2000s once again.
Sure.
And now they have the tools to be able to do so in either a healthy or unhealthy way, however that's presented. And so looking to like what the future looks like I don't know if it's the most positive, body positive kind of message that we're going to get in the future. I think we're going to continue to see a lot of backtracking around this topic as we've seen since the pandemic started. I think we're going to see a lot of the work that happened from these fat activists kind of go backwards as it's already started to. I appreciate this message that Oprah's presenting, but I think it's like too little too late almost to be able to really outweigh all the kind of societal factors that have come into play since the pandemic started.
Scaachi, I'm interested in that idea, the idea that it might be a little bit too little too late, because in a way, so like I was talking to one of our former producers, Nikki Manfredi, about this, and Nikki sort of made the excellent point that in some ways, Oprah is sort of absorbing the protest into the brand, right? Like the idea of, I was the thing that so many people started to protest against, and now I'm trying to become the new ideal, the new sort of message, which is to say, now that we arrived at this place where anything is possible with these, weight loss drugs, drugs. I will allow myself to become the embodiment of the literal opposite of the thing that I represented for a long time. And she can do that because she's a billionaire. But what would meaningful atonement look like for Oprah to say, yeah, I apologize for everything that I've done, for the ways that I've created these conversations? What are you looking to hear from her?
I'm not looking to hear anything from her. I don't care if Oprah atones for anything because it doesn't matter to me. And ultimately, she's built her entire business off of this. This was her career. It's like me being like, I wonder when Ric Flair is going to apologize for using so much bottle blonde. Like, that's his whole thing. That was who Ric Flair was. Like, Oprah's whole thing was this. So why would I go to her and be like, when is she going to say sorry? She's still engaged in it. She's still living in it. That's her right. That's her business. It's her money. But I'm not going to run after her and try to get apologies from someone who I think is too deep into this. Like, that's not the place I'm going to look. I have to look elsewhere.
But are we not owed some accountability though or because it becomes too easy for someone to just absorb the protest into their own brand in a way? Yeah,
for sure. But I mean, like, owed what? We watched the show. We're watching this now. Like, owed what? She doesn't owe anybody anything. I don't think anybody owes anybody anything. We get to decide if we want to listen to her. Yeah. And we have some people decide that they still are, and some people decide that they don't want to anymore. But owed, I don't know. What's the point? She already did it. It's a little late.
She sure did. We have to leave it there, but I appreciate your time. Scaachi, Koul, Gianluca, Russo, you guys are the best. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thanks, Elamin.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Scaachi Koul is a freelance writer in New York. Gianluca Russo is the author of The Power Plus. He was in Arizona. They were speaking about Oprah's acknowledgement of the role that she played in creating a toxic diet culture. I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud, and this is Commotion. Let me just say, this is for you if you've ever been or ever known a 90s kid who grew up watching Saturday cartoons. That is a theme for X-Men, the animated show with mutants like Professor X, Storm, and Cyclops, and that one Canadian guy, Wolverine. I think it's fair to say that between 1992 and 1997, X-Men turned a generation of kids into lifelong superhero fans. Well, earlier this year, Disney Plus announced the return of that beloved show. It is called X-Men 97, and it picks up right where the original series left off. Some are calling it the best X-Men adaptation to date. Yes, that includes the movies. The first season just wrapped this week. I spoke with Frankey Smith, aka Fantastic Frankey, about this. Frankey's a comic book critic and a longtime X-Men fan. I want you to hear our conversation. Frankey, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Listen, before we dig in, what did the 90s X-Men cartoon mean to you growing up?
I was at prime age when it dropped. So I used to read comic books with my dad. Yeah. I loved it. I used to watch every episode when it dropped. Saturday morning cartoons was definitely my jam.
Did you have a favorite character? You had a favorite character. I can see that about you.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Growing up, it was Jubilee. I think it was because she was the closest in age, and she kind of served as the audience member. Like, she was our conduit. Yeah. But now I grew up, I'm a Cyclops fan. I don't know if you guys can see my shirt. He's like a grown-up favorite,
Yeah, I like that you're like, now that I'm grown, I have developed newer and more refined tastes. Let's talk about this new show. Let's talk about the new cartoon. People are calling it the best X-Men adaptation ever. That feels kind of great. Like, better than the Hugh Jackman movies, like the Stella and Wolverine movies. Okay, talk to me. What is it about X-Men 97 that makes people go, yeah, this is where it's at?
I think it's because it's such a close adaptation to some of the best storylines that we've seen in comics. The Hugh Jackman movies are incredible, but they're a huge deviation from the comics, especially since they center Wolverine in such a way where X-Men is and has always been an ensemble comic book and story. Sure. And I very much enjoyed the Bryan Singer and Logan. Yeah. But this is so incredibly true to what we've seen. It almost feels like an anime in the way that it's adapted from the source material.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the animation? Because I feel like this is a really big part of what people are reacting to.
Yes. X-Men, the animated series, was done very well in terms of storyline and script, but the animation was terrible. And so I feel like they were able to like catch up with the animation now and still stay very true to the original animation. I actually got a chance to speak to one of the animators, and they kept the frame rate very slow, like around 30 frames per second, which if you guys aren't into animation, that means nothing. But
yeah, I'm listening to you. I'm like, Frankey, being not an animation scientist, I don't know what you're saying, but I take your word for it.
It's an older style and a slower style of animating. So it's just a way to play homage. But because we're able to see these scenes play out, it lands a level of pettiness that we really didn't get to see. Because at the end of the day, the X-Men are a gang who like to jump people. And I really love that we get to see that now, you know?
Okay, let's hear a little bit more of the new series while we talk. This is an exchange between Magneto and the United Nations while he's on trial. Magneto's on trial for crimes against humanity.
As a boy, my people's homes were burned to ash because we dared to call God by another name. In history's sad song, there is a refrain: believe differently, love differently, be of different sex or skin, and be punished. We sing this song to one another. The oppressed become oppressors.
Humanity must protect itself.
Protection? That is extermination.
A moment from the new revival cartoon X-Men 97. My name is Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud, and I'm speaking with X-Men superfan Frankey Smith. Frankey, the X-Men story has always been praised for the way that the conflict between mutants and humans sort of parallel, racial tensions, xenophobic tensions in the real world. How do you think the themes in this revival cartoon are sort of holding up in 2024?
Man, a little too well, honestly.
Okay.
And I think that's a sad reflection to humanity as a whole and the way that we react towards people that, a story that was originated in 1960s still is very relevant. And I think it is a little ironic, but also great to see a canonically Jewish man from the Holocaust speak these words during like our current times, where he's talking about inclusion, he's talking about xenophobia, and he's addressing it.
You're talking about Magneto
head on.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off. Just continue your thought there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was pretty much it, where, he's speaking the thoughts that we have. And it's almost like all Twitter lines, like things that we have been saying and we've been debating or even saying lightheartedly. He is saying directly to like UN officials, to government officials. And I think that's very impactful.
Also, this in this whole conversation, like speaking of race, an issue that some fans have kind of continued to point it out is the whitewashing of the character Sunspot, who was black and dark-skinned in the original comics, is a bit racially ambiguous in the films. And now in this cartoon also. Where do you stand on that decision?
Yeah, I'm one of those disappointed fans. In the films, he's not even ambiguous. He's straight up white.
Yeah.
In this, I think he's way more ambiguous. He's definitely darker.
Yeah.
And I think because they pushed his allegory to be closer to coming out, like the LGBTQ experience, they didn't focus more on his race. But it is a missed opportunity because his race is a huge part of his story. He is Afro-Latino, he is Brazilian, but he's very dark-skinned, and that's a huge part of his story. And I hope in some way we can see that in the upcoming seasons.
Okay, so we're catching you like literally minutes after you just watched the final episode of X-Men 97. It just dropped. You just finished watching it. Did it land for you? How did it land for you watching this conclusion?
Incredible. It's such a beautiful story, and it was done so well. I was in awe. It's incredible. If you guys feel my excitement, it's because I'm fresh off of it. I just was like, it's great.
Yeah, like I should say for people listening and can't see Frankey right now, like you're basically like lifting off your chair as you just like I've just finished.
I actually strapped myself down to make sure I could stay grounded.
Amazing. Do you think X-Men 97 feels like something that needs another season, or was this like the kind of thing that was like, you know what, this is the perfect amount of nostalgia. I don't need any more of this. This is the perfect container. Let's not do any more.
Yeah, well, it's actually, the first two seasons were actually written by the original showrunner, Bo DeMaio, and this one confirms that the story is not done. It says to be continued at the end of this season, in the fashion that they would always do at the end of the animated series. Yeah. So there's at least one more season, and there's definitely a lot more story to tell.
Frankey, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you being our guide to X-Men 97. This has been a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was my first time in Canada.
Hey, welcome. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Frankey Smith is a comic book critic and founder of Fanboy Fighter. You can watch the entire season of X-Men 97 right now on Disney+. My name is Elamin Abdul Mahmoud. This show is called Commotion. That's it for the show. I will see you tomorrow.